So your student says, I want to improve my grammar, pronunciation for meetings, interviews, and get more confidence. And you have 1 hour for the lesson. So where do you start? Now you could give every goal 10 minutes, a little grammar, a little pronunciation, a meeting activity, maybe one interview question at the end. But there's a problem. By the end of the lesson, you may have done 5 different activities, but your student may not be able to say, okay, this is what I can do better now. If your student is paying for online lessons, at the end of each hour, they must be able to describe what they can do better. Otherwise, they may not return for another lesson. That's where many online teachers' businesses fail. Hi, I'm Marie Richards, an experienced online English teacher. I've helped English learners worldwide improve their English for work, for study, and for their everyday lives. How did I do that? Through over 14,000 online lessons. Now I'm sharing practical strategies, student success stories, and the habits that help English learners reach their variety of goals. So subscribe, click the notification bell, and share with your friends. You see, one of my IT students came to me with a list just like this. He wanted a little grammar, pronunciation, help with meetings, help with interviews. Then he told me that during meetings, his manager would sometimes say, I'll explain it later, whenever the student asked the manager a question to clarify a point during a meeting. Can you imagine if this were you? And during a meeting, you asked a question, then your manager summarily dismissed you with the comment, I will explain later. If this comment was told to me, I would feel very humiliated. That one sentence told me much more than his long list of goals did. It helped me to see what he needed to work on first. In this video, I'll walk you through the 3 steps I used. First, I find the real communication moment, then choose one clear result for the first lesson from that communication moment. And finally, put all the other goals into a learning path that actually makes sense. Now, let's start with the label Business English. This is what many students ask for when they ask for help to improve their English for work. In fact, it may be exactly what a student types when they're looking for a teacher online. But it is not really a lesson plan. Business English could mean leading a meeting, answering an interview question, explaining a technical problem, negotiating a deadline, writing emails, or just chatting with colleagues at lunch. And those are not the same things. Each interaction requires different language, different levels of formality, because they are different relationships. So you will produce different results. So Business English tells us where, meaning the place, the student may use English. It does not tell us what they need to do or learn next. Now, I'll call this student Alan. This is not his real name. Alan was an IT engineer from Turkey, living and working in the Netherlands. He worked with global systems and regularly communicated with colleagues in London. He wanted to understand his British colleagues more easily. He also wanted to produce clearer pronunciations, longer answers, better technical explanations, and support when preparing for a future job. So yes, his goals were broad, but they were also completely reasonable. Now, I could have started almost anywhere within his list. I could have given him a British English listening exercise, or we could have worked on pronunciation. I could have opened a grammar worksheet, or We could have started practicing interview questions, but I had to ask myself, which one would make the biggest difference in his actual work life right now? Something of value he could recognize by the end of the hour. The answers started to show up when Alan described what happened in meetings. Sometimes he did not fully understand a point. Maybe the speaker was moving quickly. Maybe the discussion changed direction. Maybe he heard unfamiliar technical language. And instead of Alan being able to join the conversation and clarify a point by asking a question, his manager would step in and say, "I'll explain later." Now, this was not just a British accent listening problem. The real issue was what happened after Alan missed something. Could he interrupt and pause the conversation with the team politely? Could he chat what he thought he had understood? Could he ask one clear, useful question? Could he summarize the decision before the meeting moved on? That was the moment that mattered in a meeting with Alan. You see, it became very difficult for Alan to follow the meeting if one point is blocked in his ability to understand. Once I looked at the situation that way, the help that he needed became much clearer. As I was analyzing what I was hearing, I was looking for 4 key points. Who was the learner? What was the moment? Who was the listener? And what was the result we needed to achieve? The learner was an international IT engineer. The moment or situation was a live technical meeting. The listeners were his manager and teammates. And the result he wanted was shared understanding. Everyone leaves knowing the decision and the next action for that meeting. So now we had something I could actually teach. At this point, the question changed. It was no longer, how can Alan improve his business English? Rather, it became, what could Alan do differently and better by the end of this lesson hour? That is a much more useful question for the teacher to assess. So the first lesson goal became this. After listening to a short technical update, Alan would identify the main issue, ask one clear clarification question, and give a 30-second summary of the decision and next action. Now that is specific. It is teachable, it is smart, and it is something we can actually hear and observe. We could begin with a quick first attempt. Nothing complicated, just something that he listens to, a short update, responds to naturally, and we could see what happens. Then I might introduce one simple clarification phrase. Then Alan uses it. He checks the information, confirms the next step, and tries the task again. It would go something like this. So just to make sure that I understand, are we saying that XYZ? Then Alan uses it. He checks the information, confirms the next step, and tries the task again. If Alan could do this well, listening, clarifying, and summarizing in the moment, Alan would give his manager a reason to respond to him directly, rather than ending the conversation with, "I'll explain later." And now, he does not just have to trust me when I say, "That was better." He can compare the 2 attempts and hear the difference himself. More importantly, he can test his manager's reaction. So this is where ESL teachers can add the most value, turning vague goals into specific, measurable communication tasks that both the teacher and the student can recognize when they're completed successfully. Improved listening becomes identify the main issue. Improved speaking becomes give a short, clear summary. And improved confidence becomes ask the question instead of staying silent. And grammar has not disappeared. If Alan needs past tense to explain what caused the technical incident, then past tense becomes part of the lesson. But now grammar has a real job to do. We know where he'll use it, what the grammar will help him to do, and why it matters to him in that moment. The other goals have not disappeared either. They finally have an order, a pathway. We might begin with meeting recovery, which is asking for clarification and summarizing decisions. Then Alan could practice explaining a technical problem using 4 simple parts. After that, we could work on past tense so he can explain incident timelines more clearly. Pronunciation practice could focus on technical words that repeatedly cause confusion. Turn-taking could help him to enter a fast conversation, holding the floor for a moment, or manage an interruption without sounding abrupt. And one turn-taking that works very often is just saying, "Excuse me, could I?" and then ask your question. And later, those same technical experiences could become strong stories for job interviews. So instead of teaching random topics every week in business English, everything starts connecting. Each lesson can also begin with a quick review of the last skill. Not a long test, not something stressful, just a short task that brings the language back to mind and shows us whether Alan can still use it. Then we add the next layer of skill. So the course grows over time and your student stays with your online lessons. But it doesn't feel like we're throwing away last week's lesson and starting from zero again. After around 14,000 online lessons, this is what personalization has come to mean for me. It does not mean inventing a completely unrelated activity every week just to make the lesson look different. It means remembering where the student is trying to go. It means noticing what happened the last time they performed the skill. And it means helping them understand why the next task matters. The students can feel that continuity, and the teacher practices appropriate scaffolding. The student is not just booking another isolated hour of English. They're continuing down a learning path, and they can see where it's going. Here's a simple way to try this with one of your own students. Complete this sentence. My student needs to use English to XYZ with XYZ so that XYZ happens. For Alan, it became, he needs to clarify technical information with his international teammates so that everyone in the meeting or conversation understands the decision and next action. Once you have that sentence, you can still teach grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, listening, and speaking. But now you know which language matters first and why. Business English may help a student find your teaching profile, but a specific communication result helps you decide what to teach next. Your teaching niche is not every language topic you know how to teach. It is the communication problem you repeatedly know how to notice, how to diagnose, practice, and help your students solve. If one of your students has given you a vague goal, such as business English, put their exact words in the comments below. I may use one of those examples in a future video. And if you'd like to see the same method used for interview preparation, watch this video about the Antonio case next. If you'd like to purchase my book, Behavioral Interview Power, to assist your students with behavioral interview preparation, you can find it right here. If this video benefited you in any way, please consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and sharing it with your friends. It will help you to to be notified of my next video on the best practices I've learned over 14,000 lessons in teaching English online.